One of the questions in private equity about how carried interest is distributed among the team concerns the so-called points system, which is a system to allocate private equity rewards among the staff of the private equity fund manager. And this is something that is quite poorly understood. So let me explain how it works. Okay, so let's explore how we work a point system in private equity. So you should be seeing the spreadsheet here, and we're going to work through that. So let's start by making one point, which is that at the time that I'm creating the point system, I don't know how much the carried interest is going to be, because at the beginning of the life of the fund, I don't know how much bonus or carried interest is going to be there, and I'm only going to see that over the years as these years pass. But in the meantime, I need a system in order to remunerate the team so that each member of the team has an idea of what they can expect and that they can actually have a claim to sharing that carried interest. And that's why I designed a point system. So the point system, the reason for its design is in order to provide people with a claim in advance of the carried interest being materializing or being available. So with this spreadsheet, I've designed a fairly basic point system. So let's walk our way through that. So firstly, let's arbitrarily set the total number of points. So the total number of points will correspond to the total of the carried interest that's available. So I don't know how much that could be. It could be $1 million, it could be $10 million. I don't know at this point. So I arbitrarily set the number of points to a certain number. In this case, I've chosen 100. Often people use 20 in order to make it reflect the 80-20 split, but it's a totally arbitrary decision. So here I'm going to use 100 points. And so now it's a question of how we allocate points for what you do in order to make the fund a success. So I've firstly broken it down into 3 tasks, 3 functions, let's say. The founders, so the people who had the idea to set up the fund and got it started. Fundraising, so playing a role in helping to raise the money for the fund to go ahead. And then managing the fund after the fund has been raised. And I've broken it into 20% of the points will go to the founders, 30% of the points will go for fundraising, and 50% of the points will go for managing the fund. In fact, Invest Europe has put out a paper in which it recommends as a matter of best practice in private equity that at least 50% of the points should be reserved for managing the fund after it has been raised. So as you can see, the founders would get then 20 points, the fundraising activity 30 points, and managing the fund 50 points. So let's go down to the founders. I've given them some funny names. The founders are Charles, George and Henry. So let's say Charles had the biggest role. He got the whole thing started. George and Henry came in a bit later. So they've kind of split their 20 points among themselves according to this ratio, so that Charles will get about 9 points, George 6, Henry 5, and that adds up to 20 points among the founders. Then I get to the points which are for the fundraising, and I've called the fundraisers Sven, Arne and Olaf. So Sven gets a bit more, Olaf a tiny bit less, Arne rather gets a tiny bit less, and Olaf 25%. So Sven gets 12 points, Arne gets 10.5, and Olaf 7.5, and that adds up to 30. And you'll notice that the founder points and the fundraising points basically will cease to be distributed at the moment the fund is formed. So it's in a more limited time span for a more limited task. Enjoying the program? Well, please subscribe to my channel. It costs you nothing and it would mean a lot to me. Thanks very much. Then we get to the fund. Let's say the fund's got started in the year 1997, as a matter of, in the case of this example. And so one thing we can do is we have, as you remember, we have, if you look here, we have 50 points, and these can be spread over the years the fund is going to be active. So let's assume the fund is active over 7 years. So let's say that in the first year of the fund, we're just getting organized, so we're only going to put 5 points for that year. Then in the years 98, 99, 2000, 2001, the fund is reaching its main capacity, it's really busy, it's investing, and so we put 10 points for each of that year. Then by 2002, 2003, the fund is winding down, it's doing its exits, so we have less points for those years. And these points we then distribute among the staff. So let's see how this could work. So we have in our staff, we've got Pompeo, who's getting 10% of those 5 points, he gets a point. Aureliano, who gets 40%, he's obviously more senior, gets 2 points. Agrippina, the same, she gets 2 points. Plotina gets nothing, she hasn't joined the firm yet. Cesare hasn't joined yet. Augusto is a junior, he gets 1 point. Traiano hasn't joined, and Tiberio hasn't joined, he gets 0 points. And we repeat the exercise over the years, and you can see in the case of Pompeo, for example, his role gets diluted a little bit. So he gets an average of 5% of the points. Aureliano is quite intensely involved, then he leaves the firm. Agrippina the same, she leaves the firm. Plotina joins after a couple of years and plays a central role. Cesare joins a year after that, then plays a major role, and similarly to the others. And so you can see the points get spread over time among the different members of staff. So by the end of it, Pompeo will have matured 3 points, Aureliano 10, Agrippina 11, Plotina 15, Cesare 7, Augusto 2, Traiano 1, and Tiberio 1, and that adds up to 50. And so when the carried interest starts to arrive, each check of carried interest will be divided pro rata according to the number of points. So for example, Pompeo will get 3% of the carry of that check, Aureliano 10% of that check. If we go back to Charles will get 8.8% of that check, and Sven 12% of that check. So that's more or less how a carried interest system works. It's also possible that some of the points will not be distributed fully to the people. They'll still be held as a kind of treasury point. So they'll be held in reserve to be distributed later. It's also possible some points may be allocated to board members or external partners. So that also has to be considered when we are designing a carried interest point system. But you can see the advantage of this is that even before the first check is issued, let's say the first carried interest distribution takes place in 2002, people already know what claim they're going to have and what they can expect, rather than working in the dark. So you'll see one of the main differences between the private equity point system and say an investment banker's bonus is that it's very mathematically defined. Once you know how many points you have and the carried interest is paid out, you get your mathematical share of it. It's not at anybody's discretion. Okay, so that's really in a nutshell how a point system is going to work. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did find it interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel.